Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg and Twitter co-founder and CEO Jack Dorsey testified on Capitol Hill Wednesday, where they faced tough questions on election meddling. The two executives told lawmakers their companies are better prepared than they were in 2016 to combat foreign interference. CBS News' Nicole Killian reports from Capitol Hill.
Nearly 2 years after the 2016 elections, Facebook and Twitter executives told a Senate panel their companies were not properly equipped to stop misinformation campaigns on their platforms.
We were too slow to spot this and too slow to act. That is on us.
We are proud of how that free and open exchange has been weaponized. We found ourselves unprepared and ill-equipped for the immensity of the problems that we've acknowledged.
Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg and Twitter's Jack Dorsey said they learned from the past and that they are coordinating with other social media companies and law enforcement to stop bad actors.
Finding inauthentic behavior is a challenge, and I think you're seeing us put real resources to bear.
Dorsey said Twitter has suspended over 3,000 accounts believed to be linked to the same Russian internet agency identified in special counsel Robert Mueller's indictment.
Google was also invited to the Senate hearing but declined the invitation.
Alex Jones, host of the now canceled web program InfoWars, attended the hearing as a spectator.
The real election meddling is by Facebook and Google and others that are shadow banning people, that are outright banning people.
Dorsey was pressed on Twitter bans while appearing solo before a House panel later in the day.
Our policies and our algorithms don't take into consideration any affiliation, philosophy, or viewpoint.
Dorsey testified thousands of accounts, including some lawmakers, were inadvertently caught in its filtering algorithm. Nicole Killian, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
And joining me now from Stamford, Connecticut, is Adam Sharp. He is the former head of government and politics at Twitter. Adam, thank you for being with us. Sheryl Sandberg and Jack Dorsey both admitted that their companies had shortcomings in fighting foreign interference during the 2016 election. I want to play for you some of what they had to say. Let's listen.
We were too slow to spot this and too slow to act. That is on us. This interference was completely unacceptable. It violated the values of our company and of the country we love.
We found ourselves unprepared and ill-equipped for the immensity of the problems that we've acknowledged. Abuse, harassment, troll armies, propaganda through bots and human coordination, misinformation campaigns, and divisive filter bubbles. That's not a healthy public square.
So, Adam, during your tenure at Twitter, you led the company's approach to the 2012 and 2000 U.S. elections. Is that correct? So would you agree with Jack Dorsey when he says Twitter was ill-equipped? And in your view, what could both companies have done better?
I do agree that both companies, and I Google to the mix that didn't make the hearing today, were unprepared in 2016. And part of that was the mentality at the time. This was before you had the daily tweet from the President of the United States, for example, where Twitter's role and Facebook's role in politics was still seen as ascendant. The main focus of our team was trying to get candidates and campaigns to use the tools more and to actually take advantage in good ways of the unbelievable potential of these platforms to organize and connect with voters. Frankly, DI was not on the ball when it came to, well, what about other people using those same techniques for ill gains? And I think that's something both companies are trying to address now.
Right. So this idea that there could be so many malicious actors out there was one that these companies hadn't fully grasped.
They hadn't. Their focus at the time had largely been on spammers in terms of malicious acts, the type of actors out there who would create bot accounts mainly to put Viagra ads in the search for whatever the trending topic was of the day. Because frankly, that was the sheer volume that they were looking at of these accounts. What was unique about the Russian interference was that as a percentage of the overall conversation, it was quite small. And so it wasn't noticed as readily as these big spam campaigns. But of course, it was more targeted and had a bigger community impact that we're now reckoning with.
Right. Of course, you also just mentioned that Google was not there. Senate intelligence leaders criticized Google for not sending its top executives, Sundar Pichai, to speak alongside his counterparts. So as someone who has worked closely with Washington, how surprised are you that Google chose not to participate in this hearing? And could that absence come back to bite Google in the long run?
It was a mistake for Google not to attend. They, of course, of these three big companies, were the first to open a DC operation. They have the largest team of professional lobbyists and officials, including former members of Congress, on their team. So certainly there would have been the advisors internally saying being the odd man out, being that empty chair would not be good optically. And these issues do go across all three companies. Now, certainly, there is a desire from the political side for the CEOs to be the ones in the hot seat. So today we saw Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg has been on the Hill before. Jack Dorsey from Twitter. My understanding is Google's preference was we'd rather give you the people who were in the pits working on these issues and who can actually walk through it. So there is some argument for Google's position of rather than doing just a show where you beat up on the CEO to get on TV, let's give you the people who work these issues every day, write the code, and so on. That's not how Capitol Hill works. And there are certainly enough people at Google who could have told their CEO that.
Absolutely. All right. Senator Mark Warner praised Twitter and Facebook for taking steps in the right direction, but he did say both companies still aren't doing enough. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Now, each of you have come a long way with respect to recognizing the threat. We've seen important action by your companies to make political advertising more transparent, and we discussed this yesterday, by complying with the terms Senator Klobuchar and I put forward in the Honest Ads Act. In addition, as the chairman mentioned, since last September, you have identified and removed some bad actors from your platforms. The bad news, I'm afraid, is that there's still a lot of work to do. And I'm skeptical that ultimately you'll be able to truly address this challenge on your own. I believe Congress is going to have to act.
So, Adam, you understand the role that Capitol Hill can play in all of this. What exactly is Senator Warner insinuating when he refers to action being taken by Congress? I mean, there seems to be such a Silicon Valley, Capitol Hill divide, and never the twain shall meet. It's sort of as if they don't quite fully understand each other. So what would this action look like?
Well, they absolutely don't understand each other. That's what our entire team was trying to bridge gaps on in my time at the company. What Senator Warner was referring to is some language in the Communications Decency Act that gives very broad protections for the tech companies and immunities. It basically has two parts. One that says the companies are not responsible for the content on their platforms, and that if something on the platform is improper or illegal, the companies can't be sued for that. The other element of this clause is that if the companies do moderate content and they use their own rules for how to do that and throw off the wrong people when they suspend accounts, they also can't be liable for that. And so this broad immunity that basically says you have no responsibility whatsoever has been a critical part in the rapid growth of this industry because it gives them this umbrella shield against most major lawsuits that would get in the way of any other major industry. But to Senator Warner's point, it's probably time to revisit elements of that and say this immunity is not absolute. This law was passed a decade before any of these companies even existed and was intended for a completely different purpose. And so there are some perfectly reasonable boundaries to put on this to say the companies do have a responsibility not to sit there and approve every single Facebook post and tweet before it goes out, but certainly when malicious acts are brought to their attention, they have a responsibility to act. And that is a message that should come from Congress and the courts.
Adam Sharp, I think a lot of Americans would agree with you on that point. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you, Tony.